I want to say a word of welcome to everyone who's gathered with us in our sanctuary this morning. We're so glad you're here at our 9:45 service. And for those of you who are watching us online, whether you're with us live on Sunday morning or watching later in the day or later in the week, if you're at your kitchen table or your living room or out on the back porch, wherever you are, we are so glad you're a part of our congregation as well. Let's pray together. Lord, we're so grateful for your sustaining grace, for your love. We ask, Lord, in these moments, that the words of my mouth and the meditations and thoughts of all of our hearts and minds together would be pleasing and acceptable, Lord, in your sight. Lord, you're our rock, you're our Redeemer. Amen. My Aunt Dee Dee was kind of like a second mother to me. My Aunt Dee Dee was never able to have kids of her own, and so I was her favorite nephew. Of course, I was her only nephew, but it made me still the favorite. And she sometimes just understood things I think my parents didn't. Sometimes she would give me a gift for Christmas or birthday that my parents would have never thought of. I think she had maybe an insight into what a boy might want that my parents just didn't quite grasp. And she continued to be a great supporter of me and then for Janine and me as we got married. And she also gave some really nice gifts to us when we really needed them. For example, when we got married and I was still in seminary and Janine was still in college and we didn't have any money, and she gave us a honeymoon trip. She gave us a trip to Hawaii, which was something we never would have thought of or been able to afford. And that was a wonderful gift. And then even after we were back in Oklahoma and serving in ministry, in 1987, at Christmas of 1987, she gave us a great gift. She gave us a microwave oven. It looked about like that. That's the 80s style of a microwave. And you might think, well, that's not a big deal. But back in the day, in the early, mid-80s, microwaves were more expensive than they are now. There was new technology. And a new microwave back in 87 would have cost about $250, which in today's dollars would be about $600. And so I was the associate pastor at Wesley Church in Oklahoma City, and we didn't have extra money for a microwave. And so my aunt gave us a microwave, and it changes your life, You can heat up the leftovers. You can get the water boiled for hot chocolate in a couple of minutes. You can make nachos in just a couple of minutes with some Doritos and some, sliced cheese. I mean, you could do all kinds of stuff. And you might think it's not that big a deal, but it was a gift that enriched our life. It made our life a little nicer, a little better. I want to talk about a gift today, and I specifically want to talk about a gift that we call the fourth commandment. We've been talking about the 10 commandments, and I've been calling them the 10 really gifts from God, the 10 rules for life, and talking about them also how Jesus viewed these commandments. And really saying the commandments are not something that is supposed to make our life worse, not something to keep us down or make us miserable or keep us from having a full life. No, these commandments are like guardrails on a dangerous road to keep us from going off the edge, going off the ledge. And this fourth commandment, along with the other commandments, are given to the people of Israel as they're wandering in the desert after they've come out of slavery and bondage in Egypt about 1400 BC. That's about 3,400 years ago. And this fourth commandment is a gift from God. It is a day off. A day off. God gives the people of Israel a day of rest, a day off. And it's a gift that's really wrapped in a commandment. It's almost a gift disguised as a commandment. God gives the people of Israel a day to rest, a day to worship, a day to spend time with their family, a Sabbath day. Now, you may not realize this, but this is revolutionary. This is a new thing for the human race. Archaeologists and historians and people who study cultures and ancient cultures, there had never been a day off before. A day off, a regular day of rest. A regular day of rest was something that, as far as historians and anthropologists and archaeologists can figure out, this had never happened before. There's no culture before 1400 BC that had a regular day off, a regular day of rest. Everybody worked every day. That was life on planet Earth. Everybody worked every day, especially if you were a slave. Like the Jewish people, the Hebrew people had been in Egypt. They worked every day, back-breaking labor. You remember, they were used to build these giant tombs and monuments in ancient Egypt. And, you know, if you see some of the great treasures of Egypt, the pyramids and the Sphinx and some of these other things, you see, at least imagining hundreds and thousands of slaves making bricks and then building these huge monuments under the whip of a taskmaster. And they would work from all day and every day and then be exhausted. And there was no such thing as a day off. But God gives the children of Israel in the desert this new idea that every seventh day there's a day of rest, a day off. God says, work for 6 days and then work for 6 days and then rest for one. He says, I created the whole universe in 6 days, and then I rested, and that's what you need to do too. Every seventh day, rest. And he not only gives them the commandment, he kind of puts it into practice with a story that is kind of strange, but kind of amazing. You know, that as they come out of Egypt and they come into the desert, and they're wandering in the desert, and they're stubborn and they're kind of contrary and they're arguing with one another and with Moses all the time. And they get out there and they go, we're hungry. There's not enough food. Where are we going to get food out here in the desert? Moses, did you bring us out here to starve us to death? Oh, back in Egypt we had food. Where's the food? And Moses goes to God and God says, I'm going to send food from heaven, bread from heaven. And there's this thing called manna. And God says, I'm going to send manna from heaven. It was this bread-like substance that every morning, kind of like the dew on the ground, there would be this flaky bread. And the people would go out each morning and gather this flaky bread, and they called it manna, which means in Hebrew, what is it? Because they picked it up and go, what is it? And that's what they called it. They called manna means, what is it? So every morning they would gather this bread from heaven, this manna. And God gave very specific instructions about the manna. He said, every day I'm going to send the manna. I'll send you enough for the day, but only enough for the day. And don't try to keep it or store it up or store it away, because it won't keep. It'll go bad after a day. It'll turn rotten after a day. So don't try to store it, but I'm going to give you enough every day for that day. Except on Friday, I'm going to send twice as much. On Friday, I'm going to send twice as much manna, and that extra manna won't spoil. And the reason I'm doing that is so on the Sabbath day, Saturday, because remember for Jews, Saturday is the Sabbath. He says on Saturday is a day of rest. So you don't have to go out and gather the manna on Saturday. You don't have to gather the bread on Saturday. It won't even be there. I'm not going to send it on Saturday. I'm going to send twice as much on Friday. So on Friday, gather the double portion, and then Saturday, take the day off. Don't worry about getting up and gathering manna, because it won't even be there. And this is how it's going to work. So don't try to gather it on Saturday. So what do you think the people did? Well, it says this in Exodus 16:27. Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the seventh day to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. That's why on the sixth day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the seventh day. No one is to go out. So the people rested on the seventh day. The people that went out on Saturday morning looking for the manna are what we call workaholics. Okay? Or maybe they weren't workaholics. Maybe they just didn't trust God. They didn't believe God when he said, I'm going to send you twice as much on Friday. Don't go out on Saturday. They didn't believe him. They didn't trust him. They thought, well, maybe it'll be out after. They didn't know how to follow instructions. But they went out on Saturday anyway. You see, God gave them this gift of the Sabbath, but he had to put it in the form of a command, because if he didn't make it a command, people wouldn't accept the gift. People wouldn't take the day off. He had to make it mandatory because he knew people, if he didn't make the day off mandatory, people would ignore the gift. People tend not to value this gift. And if the people 3,400 years ago tended often not to value that gift, we also are in the same boat. We tend to not value the gift either. We tend to not understand or believe that we need rest, and we need worship, and we need family time. That God made us to need rest and worship and family time. Now, as I said, remember, our Jewish friends, for them the Sabbath is Saturday. Actually, the Sabbath is from sundown Friday till sundown Saturday. The Sabbath begins when the sun goes down on Friday night, and then that's when all work stops, and then it picks up again at sundown on Saturday. That's the Jewish Sabbath. And people say, well, how come we don't, if that's the Jewish Sabbath, why don't we observe that? Well, ever since the early church, ever since really the time of the disciples and the apostles, Christians have made Sunday our Sabbath day, our day of rest. Why Sunday? Because Sunday is the day of resurrection. Sunday is the day that Jesus rose from the dead. Every Sunday is like a little mini Easter. And so for centuries, Christians all around the world of all different denominations have worshiped and made our Sabbath Sunday, with a couple of exceptions. The Seventh-day Adventists still worship on Saturday, but almost every other Christian group, Sunday is our Sabbath. And so we have made that our day of rest and worship and family. Now, some people have to work on Sundays. I work on Sundays. I've worked on Sundays for 37 years. 35 as a pastor, 2 as a youth director. So I've been working on Sundays for 37 years. And the point of the gift is not, it necessarily has to be Sunday. It has to be every week you have to take a day to rest and worship and spend time with your family, your loved ones. That's the way God, that's the rhythm of God. That's the way God made us, to have this regular day of rest and worship and family. And the problem is, in our culture especially, our culture keeps going faster and faster, and our culture is a 24/7 culture, and we keep trying to cram more into every single minute and cram more in, more work and more activities and more stuff. We keep cramming and cramming and cramming more stuff into every minute. You know, 34% of Americans don't ever use their vacation. 34% of Americans who get vacation time don't take it. Don't even use a single day of their vacation, 34% of Americans. About 30% of Americans consider themselves workaholic. And those people who at least self-define as workaholics have a higher death rate, a higher divorce rate, a higher hospitalization rate, etc., etc. Almost every statistic of health and happiness is low. And amazingly, even their productivity is actually lower than people who are not workaholic. So we Americans are very proud of the fact that we don't rest, and we don't take days off, and we don't do this. Americans work more hours than almost any country in the world. You might think, really? And I remember thinking, hearing about like Japan. I'm thinking, oh, those people look like they work really hard over there in Japan, and they're exercising at work, and they're staying at work late. And you think, well, surely the Japanese work more hours than we do. No. The average American worker works 137 more hours a year than the average Japanese worker. So we in America work, and we work and work and work. And we often ignore this gift from God. God says, every 7 days, rest, worship, spend time with your family, because that's how I made you. I made you to have this Sabbath day every 7 days. So God gives this gift in the form of a commandment. He gives it to Israel. And then Israel has given it to the world. Because now a 7-day week with a day of rest built into that came from Judaism, but now it's pretty much universal. The idea, you might say, well, how come there's 7 days in a week? Why not 6 days in a week? Why not 8 days in a week? Why is there 7 days in a week? Because of Judaism. The idea of a 7-day week with a day of rest comes from Israel. God gives it to Israel. Israel gives it to the rest of the world. And sometimes, even in recent history, or fairly recent history, some countries have said, well, let's try something else. After the French Revolution, they tried a 10-day work week. Didn't work. They had to go back to 7. After the Russian Revolution in 1917, the communist revolution in Russia, they said everything religious is bad. We need to get rid of religion. Because the communists said if people are religious, if they have an ultimate allegiance to God or the church or the synagogue, if people are allegiant to God, they won't be allegiant to the state. They won't make the state their highest priority if God is their highest priority. And so the communism said religion is an opium of the people. It's a bad thing. So they decided to stamp out religion or try to stamp out religion. And they said a 7-day week with a day of rest at the end, that's a religious thing. So communist Russia shifted to a 5-day work week. And everybody had a different day off. 20% of the population was off every day. So 80% was working a day, and you had a random day off. Some people were off on the first of the 5 days, others on the 4th day, whatever. But the way it worked out was kind of a lottery, so the husband and wife would be off on different days. Husband and parents and grandkids and everybody, they all have a different day off. It didn't work. So the communists said, all right, we're going to try a 6-day work week with the same thing. Everybody have a rotating day off. Didn't work. They finally threw up their hands and said, all right, and they went back to a 7-day work week. It's almost as if we were made that way. It's almost as if we were designed that way. It's almost as if our Creator built this rhythm into us. So, God gives this gift to Israel. Israel gives it to the rest of the world. And God said, very simply, every 7th day, take a break, don't work. But what constitutes work? You see, by the time of Jesus, the rabbis and the scribes and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and all the other religious lawyers and people, they said, well, we have this commandment of God to not work on the Sabbath, but we need to define what is work. I mean, what constitutes work? What qualifies as work? And so they started figuring this out, and they figured out they said there's 39 different categories of work. 39 different categories of work. And under each of the 39 categories, they listed hundreds of examples of work, what you could and couldn't do on the Sabbath. And this became a full-time job, defining what constituted work. And for example, one of the 39 categories of work is carrying a burden, carrying a load. That's work. But they said, well, okay, but how much of a burden? How much constitutes work? How much if you carry, does that count as work? And the rabbi said, anything that weighs more than 2 dried figs is a burden. So you can't carry anything that weighs more than 2 dried figs on the Sabbath. One of the categories of work was lighting a fire. You can't light a fire on the Sabbath. One of them was cooking a meal. Can't cook a meal on the Sabbath. Can't draw water from the well on a Sabbath. And on and on and on. And this is not just in the time of Jesus. This carries on to what we would call Orthodox Jews today. You know, just like Christianity has all different kinds of Christianity. We have Protestant and Catholic and Orthodox and conservative and progressive and moderate and high church, low church. I mean, there's all different kinds of Christianity. Well, there's all different kinds of Judaism as well. And there are Orthodox Jews who are very strict in their observance of the laws of Moses. And often you'll If you see people, especially maybe in some New York or Israel, men dressed in all black, beards, big hats, these are Orthodox Jews. And Orthodox Jews continue today to define work and then say, here's what you can't do on the Sabbath. Orthodox Jews today, you cannot flip a light switch. You cannot cut your fingernail. You cannot water your flowers. These are all things forbidden for Orthodox Jews to do on the Sabbath. When we were in Israel, we've been to Israel now a couple of times, when we were in Israel, we'd stay in hotels, of course, and the hotels are always full of a variety of people like us, Christian tourists, and a lot of Jewish people of all different kinds. There are Jews in Israel who are non-religious Jews who don't follow any of the Jewish rules. And then there's more, some who follow some of them on the holidays. And then you have the ultra-Orthodox Jews as well. And you have a variety of Jewish people in the hotels in Israel. And a funny thing we noticed in the hotel in Israel, one of the elevators had this sign on it. It said this, Sabbath elevator. On the Jewish Sabbath and Jewish holidays, the elevator stops automatically on every floor. Every floor. So if it's a 12-story hotel, on the Sabbath, you walk in the elevator, stops at the first floor, stops at the second floor. Every floor it stops and the doors open. Every floor on the way down, it stops and the doors open. It stops on every floor every time, up and down. Why? For the Orthodox Jews, so they wouldn't have to push the button. Because pushing the button is work. Pushing the elevator button is defined as work. So the Sabbath elevator is for Orthodox Jews who don't want to have to work by pushing the button on the Sabbath. Now, this is only the Orthodox Jews following this today. But 2,000 years ago, in the time of Jesus, these Sabbath rules were for everybody. And one of the 39 categories of work was healing. One of the 39 categories of work was healing. And that's where Jesus got into trouble. Jesus got into trouble because he would heal people on the Sabbath. And healing was defined as work. So Jesus was a lawbreaker. Jesus was breaking the commandments, at least according to the rabbis of the day. Because when Jesus would be in a synagogue and there was somebody there who had a deformed hand or was blind or deaf or on a mat crippled, and it was the Sabbath, Jesus would heal them. And the religious officials would say, what are you doing? Don't you know it's the Sabbath? Don't you know work is forbidden on the Sabbath? Wait till tomorrow to heal this guy. Then it'll be legal to heal him. Don't heal him today. And Jesus ignored them and said, this man has a need, this woman has a need, and I'm going to heal them right now. So that's one of the reasons the Pharisees didn't like Jesus, because he's a lawbreaker. Now, the example that we read from the scripture today, it's kind of a curious example unless you understand kind of what's going on. Jesus and the disciples are walking through a grain field. And they're walking through, and they're picking the heads of grain off the stalks, and they're, rubbing them and getting the little bit of grain and pop it in their mouth, which was all perfectly legal 6 days a week. It's called gleaning. And anyone and everyone, Israelite, foreigner, poor person, rich person, whoever, anybody was allowed to walk through anybody's grain field and pop a fruit or a grain in your mouth as you're walking through. Now, you couldn't put it in a bag or a basket. You couldn't carry it out with you. But as you're walking through the grain field, it was perfectly legal to eat as you walked through the grain field, no matter whose field it was, except on the Sabbath. Because if you did it on the Sabbath, that was one of the 39 categories, harvesting. So you couldn't do it on the Sabbath. But Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field, and the disciples are doing it, and the Pharisees and the legal experts see them, and they say, Jesus, why are you letting your disciples break the law? They're breaking the Sabbath. And then Jesus kind of tells him a story that you think, what's this have to do with it? He says, don't you remember King David? He says, remember King David when he was on the run? And you remember when King David was on the run. Remember King Saul was insanely jealous of David and decided to kill him. And so he's chasing David all over the country, and David and his men are running from place to place, and they don't have any food. And they get to one of the holy places in Israel. And this is before the temple, but there were several small religious sites around Israel where the priests served. And David goes to one of these places, and he says, do you have any food? My men and I were starving to death. Do you have any food? And the priest says, well, the only food we got is this bread, but it's reserved for the priest. The bread that's there on the altar, that we put on the altar every day as a way to show love for God. We put it on the altar, and then we priests eat it later in the day. And only priests can eat it. And David, you're not a priest. You're not a Levite. You're from the tribe of Judah. And only priests from the tribe of Levi can eat the bread. So, it's forbidden for you to eat this special holy bread. And David says, we're starving to death. Give us the bread. And he gives them the bread. Now, why does Jesus tell that story? To show that human need trumps religious ritual. That human need supersedes religious ritual. That this rule about, well, only priests can eat the special bread, in that moment, you got people who are starving, give them the bread. And Jesus is saying that same idea that human need supersedes religious ritual applies to my men in the grain field. Human need is more important than your picky, silly interpretation of the law that picking one head of grain is work, or healing is healing a desperately ill person on the Sabbath is work, or these other things you won't let people even do that have made their lives harder. Because Jesus is saying, you've taken the gift of God, you've taken the Sabbath, and you've turned it into a burden. You've turned it into a weight around people's necks. Instead of taking this gift from God that's meant to make our lives better, you've taken the gift of God and made people's lives worse. All these hoops they have to jump through, all these things they can't do on the Sabbath, that makes their lives more difficult. It's not a day of rest, it's a day of, I can't light a fire. I can't get water from the well. I can't do this, I can't do that. The rabbi said, a woman on the Sabbath can't look in the mirror. You might say, why? Because the rabbi said, if a woman looks in the mirror and she sees a gray hair, she'll pluck it out, and that's work. So it's safer not to even look in the mirror. Jesus says, your silly interpretation, your picky, you've taken the gift of God and turned it into a burden. And human need trumps your silly interpretation. He says, God's rules are not meant to make life worse. And then he says this to sum it all up. He put it all in this one sentence. He says this in Mark 2:27. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. In other words, this is a gift, not a burden. God's rules are not there to make life worse. God's rules are there to make life better. See, the Pharisees and the religious officials in the first century, they had taken God's gift and turned it into a burden. Now, what we do often is we take God's gift and we just ignore it. We take God's gift of the Sabbath and the day of rest and we just ignore it and pretend like there's really maybe just 9 commandments. I'm just going to ignore that one. We just ignore this gift. And we say, I'm going to ignore my body's need for rest. I'm going to ignore my brain's need for rest. I'm going to ignore the fact that I was created by God and I was made to worship and I need to worship. Worship is a part of who I am and why I was made. There's a hole in me that only worship can fill. I'm going to ignore the need for worship. I'm going to ignore my family. we take God's gift, instead of turning God's gift into a burden, we just kind of ignore it and pretend it's not there. God made us. We need rest. We need our families. We need worship. That's how we're made. And the Sabbath is a commandment that is a beautiful gift. Listen to what the book of Isaiah, here in the book of Isaiah 58, what it says about the Sabbath. Isaiah 58, 13 to 14. If you keep your feet from breaking the Sabbath and from doing as you please on my holy day, if you call the Sabbath a delight and the Lord's holy day honorable, if you honor it by not going your own way and not doing as you please or speaking idle words, then you will find your joy in the Lord. Love that phrase there. If you honor it by not going your own way and doing as you please. Hey, going my own way and doing as I please, that's the American way. I'm going to go my own way and do as I please, and nobody can tell me what to do, not even God. Going our own way and doing as we please. And saying, God, your gift, thanks, but no thanks. I'm too busy. Here in Isaiah it says, if you will honor this gift, you'll find joy. You honor this gift, you'll find joy. Not to treat it as a burden to be carried, but a gift to be received and appreciated. So let's not abuse it. Let's not ignore it. Let's receive it and treasure it. Let's pray. Lord, how grateful we are for all your gifts. Lord, we can start listing all your gifts, and they are so many. Everything from the air we breathe and the water we drink, the people we love, our families, our friends, our neighbors, our church, our country. We can just start listing blessings and the freedom that we have in this country. And Lord, we know in this country we have the freedom to either follow you or not. We have free will. We can either obey your laws or we can ignore them. We can either do what you want or we can do what we want. But Lord, our prayer in our sane and thoughtful moments is we know if we do what you want, it'll work out better than if we do what we want. If we follow you, we'll do better than following our own ego, our own desires, our own path that sometimes can diverge from the path that you want us to walk. But Lord, thank you for this gift. Thank you for these 10 commandments, these 10 guardrails. And thank you, Lord, for this one that is a gift to us, truly. A day of rest, a day of family, a day of worship. Lord, help us not to ignore this gift. Help us to have gratitude for your gift. Amen.